Hercules Horseman here. It's October 19th, 2023. I'm still a bit sick, so you'll have to excuse me if I cough or anything like that. Anyway, after doing the video 2 days ago where I included some thoughts on Hercules silver, well, it got me really interested, and I started to really do a much, let's say, deeper dive. And I'm actually getting, well, I was already bullish, like I said in the video, but I'm getting increasingly so, I would say, the more I read up on it. And so I just put out the article, Thoughts on Hercules Silver. And I would, summarize it like I state here. I first bought into it when the main attraction was the historic resource and corresponding CRD system, which hosts the silver, lead, zinc mineralization. So from the start, I thought like, okay, well, I mean, you're buying a silver resource in Idaho. They got quite a few permits as well, so it's not a tier 1 silver deposit, but still, it's like, yeah, okay, it looks like it could grow, yada yada. I mean, some people, for example, where is it? Critical Investor, he posted like, this quote in the on CEO. I looked into this and talked to Quinton a bit, but they already seem to have pretty economic pit. 100 million ounces of AG could easily generate US 300, 400 MPV at $20 silver. So it's like, that might be true or not. Still, it's like we know that the market gives two shits right now. So everything is relative, obviously, because you can't, like, if you have 10 different silver juniors, and one is trading at 200 million, but the actual MPV is 400 million, you're like, well, there's a 100% upside. There's still probably gonna be, some juniors that might have a 400 million MPV and trading at $50 million. Whatever. I mean, it can still be cheap, but everything is relative, of course. So my point is, I guess, that even though this is maybe a pretty robust silver deposit that they already have, I'm not going to pay full price, because there's a lot of stuff out there that I don't need to pay full price for. So maybe I attribute current silver resource, I don't know, 50, 60 million, and that's in this environment. When we go into a high sentiment environment and or silver gets going, 100, 150 millions of ounces of silver in a tier 1 jurisdiction, I wouldn't be surprised to see that trade for 300-400 million or whatever. So that's, I guess, what really skews this story. Because like Condor, for example, which I also recently talked about, I believe that might be an even more volatile story, in a sense that the target is very easy to see. With very limited drilling, they can prove up something really big. So from a pure high octane upside speculations case, I would say, maybe Condor beats Hercules. But Condor, while it has a lot of projects, it does not have a resource in hand already. So you don't have that kind of margin of safety on paper, even though if you combine, how good Pucamayo looks, which I would think should already be worth quite more than the current total market cap, they still have like 11 additional projects. So that's still very much cheap. It's just that it's diversified to the upside, kind of. It's from a risk-adjusted value, I would say Condor is very cheap and actually might have higher upside potential, at least the potential pace of it, that they could prove up something a lot quicker than Hercules, for example. But still, so if Hercules did not have 150 million ounces, whatever, with obviously the potential to have a lot more. I don't think the bet would be nearly as good, because as I see it now, Hercules kind of has a lot of margin of safety, even in this crappy environment. Maybe the silver at least should be worth 50-60 million or something. So maybe we're paying 50-60 million for the upside potential. But when I think about it, I mean, going through all of this, it's like, it's obvious that this might be a huge system. I mean, the CRD alone, which they put out in a news release, because they found evidence of CRD to the southwest, maybe around, I think maybe here or even more. And this is post-mineral basalt cover, so we don't know how much further it actually stretches. But it's like bringing the total strike length of the CRD system to at least 5.5 kilometers. That's a very large CRD system. So just think about what could be there if they just focus on the CRD, and they already have, let's say, 150 million ounces. So I could argue that the silver potential in the CRD itself, especially with the inferred resource already kind of in hand, I could say it's like, it's a cheap stock. It has both beta. If silver goes up, Hercules should do well. If they find more silver, Hercules should do well. If silver goes up a lot and they find more silver, it could do really well even from this price level. But when you combine the fact that it's not only the CRD, here you have the copper porphyry target area, and look at the scale bar. I mean, this is an absolutely enormous footprint. And obviously the thing that really changed things up recently was when they drilled the first ever hole into an anomaly that lies below the silver resource. And the first hit was 185 meters of 0.84% copper, 111 ppm molybdenum, and 2.6 grams per ton Ag, including a very nice high-grade interval. And I think, I mean, I've been trying to look around at all the slides, etc. I think it kind of went into anomaly somewhere around this area, and the anomaly goes from here to down here. There's so you can see here 1.2 kilometers. That's what they've tested, kind of, because this is, I think, the edge of one of the holes down here. And okay, they have logged the pyrite intensity downhole. So I didn't actually realize that. So here's where we have results from. And this stretches, well, they've drilled it for 1.2 kilometers, actually 1.8 kilometers long in total. Which is kind of interesting, because that was a really, really good hole on the first try. So it's like there's no way really that you're going to end up drilling the best hole in the first try, because we have no idea where the best parts might be. I mean, that would be just extremely lucky. And you have this whopper of a copper gold anomaly here, especially copper. You even got some copper anomalies up here. And the interesting thing is, like, this was theorized to be, well, this is where the big porphyry is, obviously, because it's leaking, copper all over the place. In a circular feature, which makes it even more convincing. But the interesting thing, in the latest news release, they stated that they believe that what they hit here in this anomaly, that the source porphyry, you can see a potassic target. They believe this is the shell, outer pyrite halo shell of something that has its center around here. Which makes it kind of weird, because this is where everyone thought the porphyry would be hiding for obvious reasons. But what makes it even more interesting is that if we look at the... And here's the 0.8 kilometers strike length of the anomaly. If we, where is that? If we look at this, it's like, this is silver lead zinc replacement target. That's in the blue here. And basically I think they've been drilling, I'm not 100% sure, but around here, something like that. Which is, I guess, a bit odd, because the copper and gold, and where they found skarn mineralization, is here at Metheny and Big Cut. And skarn, as per a video CEO did, that's, here you can see proximal copper gold skarn. That's this, very close to the actual potassic core of a porphyry. Then you have distal skarn up here, then you have carbonate replacement. So what makes this very interesting is the fact, and here you have actually, from a Crescat video, here you have, you know, the theorized porphyry at depth. And here you have Metheny copper AU, Big Cut copper AU. And they found skarn at Big Cut, Metheny, and then they have a breccia here at which is called the lightning breccia. So again, it's like the weird, my point is that they're finding skarn here and CRD that goes something like that. That's where they, you know, drilled off the resource. And as going by the typical porphyry schematic, skarn is supposed to be closer to the porphyry than the CRD. And yet the CRD is here, where they've also drilled below it and hit in that anomaly, and they believe the target is here. So again, it's like one would assume that, okay, if the porphyry is here, makes sense because there's skarn mineralization here, and then you have porphyry away from it. CRD system in a more, you know, distal zone from it. But still you have CRD here, and they believe the target zone of the mineralization, well, the source of the copper mineralization they're hitting here below the CRD is actually to the west. So I don't know what that means. Do we have a porphyry here? And that's where, you know, this pyrite halo here belongs to. But we also have a big porphyry here, which has its distal CRD zone coming up and being placed above the copper mineralization coming from the, let's say, the western porphyry. So it's like it's getting very, very interesting. And it's like if you read up a bit on Bingham Canyon, for example, I mean, this is the pyrite rich halo, for example. Barren core, then you have kind of the ore body around it, you know, potassic alteration. So if the first hole hit the pyrite zone, the outer halo something, and we're getting this these kind of grades, I mean, that's obviously a good sign, because we're not in the actual where the good grades are expected to be yet. And also Bingham had, I mean, it's basically an entire district. Let's see if I can find that. Maybe it was up here. So here you have the Car Fork and North. Those are skarn deposits. You can I mean, they had over 100 million tons of skarn. And I think those were the first mines to actually be developed. I mean, that's kind of a, you know, a company making deposits in their own right. You know, almost 2%, above 2% copper, 61 million tons, 81 million ton, 4 million ton. And that's on top of the actual, or I should say that's in addition to the actual, the famous huge open pit. Basically they had a porphyry system with the skarn zones intact that alone were, you know, pretty robust mines. So that is what it looks like Hercules might have. Plus CRD, and I don't know if Bingham had the CRD intact as well. But it's like, now this is getting very, very interesting. Especially the fact that, again, we have a CRD which now they traced for 5.5 kilometers, and they drilled it where it outcrops over like 3.5 kilometers. And obviously they could do a lot of infill drilling and stuff like that to grow it. And they have, you know, let's say 2 kilometers more of strike to test. But then they have a huge area where here's skarn, breccia, theorized porphyry. That's on top of the CRD. And now again they believe that's why they have these kind of planned holes. That they believe that the copper mineralization they're hitting here is coming from the west, not the east. Even though this is full on, you know, a big fat copper anomaly. So the question is, okay, is this? Well, they're actually, I think, finding porphyry rocks here. So, I mean, it, I guess, would make it a lower chance that all the copper here is coming, you know, is skarn mineralization coming from the western porphyry. And if that's the case, you know, why is there CRD mineralization so close, and then actually skarn mineralization looks to be, you know, looks to be farther away than the actual CRD? Because that's not according to the schematic, where you have CRD farthest away than distal skarn, proximal skarn. I mean, here you can have, like, you know, I mean, the scale bar is like, I don't know, you know, 2 kilometers away or whatever. So I mean, that would kind of make sense if the porphyry is down here. You have proximal or distal skarn, and then the CRD mineralization shows up over here. But again, they're hitting copper here, and they think the source is just to the west, kind of above where the CRD mineralization is. So I don't know. Does this mean that we have kind of? I mean, I'm not a geologist, as you know. I mean, do we have a case where we have like two porphyry bodies and overlapping halo mineralization? That the eastern porphyry, the CRD we're finding is mostly for perhaps the eastern porphyry, from the eastern porphyry, and now that mineralization is on top of the western porphyry. So when we drill down here in the distal CRD portion from the eastern porphyry, we're actually getting close to a new porphyry body in the west. And then you have, you know, skarn mineralization here in the east, whatever. I don't know, but I think it's a very good sign when there's a lot of weird stuff going on. And if you just do, you know, some dirty math on the pyrite halo here, I mean, this might be, I mean, for example, this hole here looks to be less intense than this. This looks like it's the most intense one from a pyrite perspective, at least. I don't know if that means that the first hole is also going to be the best hole. That might be true. So the other holes we might be getting might not be as good, or maybe they are. I mean, there seems to be, since they weren't really cut off beforehand, I mean, this hole is much longer than this. But still, I guess what I'm saying is that maybe the first hole was the best of the holes, of the first drilled holes into the pyrite halo, the chargeability anomaly, but still that's not even the main prize. Because we're supposed to be in the outer pyrite zone, not even in the actual assumed ore body yet. But I mean, just given the grades they've already found, if you just do 1.2 kilometers and assume it's rounded according to the survey obviously, but if we just play around with some numbers like, okay, 1.2 kilometer strike, 300 width, 300 depth, average grade 1 gram per ton, that's around the 185 meter, what that 885 meter interval grade is, that's already up to 9.4 million ounces of AU equivalent, which again might be a bit weird given that, okay, well, that would be a sizable deposit already in the pyrite halo. And this might be totally, this is pure speculation. We only have one hole. And I don't know the exact measurements even of this body, but it's obviously looks pretty big. Still, this might be a very chaotic rant, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm getting very, very optimistic on Hercules silver. Meaning that I think there is potential for the current silver system located, in the replacement system, which carries silver, lead and zinc, that might grow. So if they have 100 to 150 million ounces right now, which might be, let's say decently economic, and especially economic at higher prices, silver prices, if that alone could grow, you could have a potential multi-bagger going into a positive sentiment environment. But then you have the potential for skarn deposits and 1 or 2 porphyry bodies as well. Basically, theoretically, another kind of maybe Bingham Canyon type situation, because there's CRD systems that alone are world class and company making. There's skarn deposits which are can be really good, but it's like if you have the entire thing preserved or a lot of the total system preserved, where you actually have porphyries that alone might be big company makers, and you have a CRD, district scale CRD system, and you have skarn deposits. That's kind of a Bingham Canyon type situation, because Bingham Canyon, I think it's still in operations today. So it's kind of been mined for like 100 years, because it had everything. So they might have started off with the skarn deposits. I don't know if they have CRD or if that's been eroded or whatever. And then obviously they have a huge, one of the largest open pits, might be the largest open pit mine in the US. So what is the value of the Bingham Canyon district? Combine the skarn, combine the porphyry, etc. I would think billions and billions of dollars if found today. So until further notice, and especially in light of the first ever hole outside the CRD system to have hit what it hits, it is suggesting, well, everything is suggesting this might be a massive district scale porphyry system or systems with corresponding skarn and CRD deposits and breccia. And I would say one might be barely paying for the current, well, maybe one is paying a bit more than what the actual silver right now that is confirmed is worth. But still, I see that it's like there's no way to undrill the silver they've drilled. And if that's worth 50, 60 million in a poor market environment, let's say, that alone could be enough to have a pretty solid return in a good market environment. But you almost get, not totally for free, but you get the shot at finding maybe a multi-billion-dollar porphyry system as well. So maybe, let's say, 50% downside risk if they don't find anything else than, confirming the silver that's already been hit kinda, and don't really find any more silver. But there's also a potential that this might be a Bingham Canyon type situation where there's gonna be multiple deposit types in the same area, and they got quite a bit of permits already, as far as I understand, which is obviously huge, because it's in the west that it's typically very hard to get mines permitted, even though that's where you would want the mine, because it's not going to get stolen from you, but it's hard to actually permit it. But they have quite a bit of permits, because they, as far as I understand, a large area they can pretty much drill wherever they want, and they have I don't know, that doesn't show up on this one, but they have like a transmission line running through the property. They have a highway, I think, that goes, I don't know if this is the actual highway or if it's one of the access roads, but it's like jurisdiction good, permits great, infrastructure appears to be great as well. So imagine, I mean, we know what a big porphyry deposit can be worth. I mean, a huge one in case of Philo mining, that's at what, $3 billion, and that's at around 5,000 meters elevation in the Andes, split between Chile and Argentina. A nightmare scenario, kinda. I mean, the elevation alone is a big hurdle, obviously, and then you have it split between two developing countries. So who knows when that's actually gonna, get mined? But the ore body is absolutely world class, and there's no guarantee this will be a world class porphyry system or two. But still, if you hit that kind of those kind of copper grades on the first hole, I mean, there's plenty of copper explorers out there that after 20-30 holes haven't hit as good of an intercept as they hit on the first hole, which was also cut short because they got into broken ground, let's say. So that might have gone on for a few hundred meters yet. So yeah, to wrap it up, this is probably all of a sudden this has probably become one of the most interesting, I would say, moderate risk, high reward stories out there. Because if they did not have the silver resource as a backstop, the risk reward would be completely different. Because in that case, if they only had one good copper hole into what could be a big system, if that ends up to be a total anomaly, they don't find anything worth its salt, then you don't have anything. Okay, you don't have anything as backstop. You might be looking at a 70% permanent risk of 70% permanent loss or whatever, or maybe 100% if it actually goes bankrupt. But given that it already has a quite sizable silver resource in the ground, and juniors are cheap right now, so it's like that silver is not going away, if you know what I mean. So as I see it, you have a cushion to the downside, while the upside exploration potential is absolutely enormous. And that's coming from both CRD, Skarn, Western Target Zone, Eastern Target Zone. So who knows what this will end up being. It's just that there is, I think, a chance that this might be a Bingham type situation. So if I'm risking 50% downside, whatever, in the short term, or I shouldn't even say short term, but it's like, you know what I mean, the market isn't rational all the time. But if they end up finding something substantial or increases the CRD or finds a Skarn or whatever, I mean, the price could be really, really big. And it's not a lot of stories where you have, it's not too many high octane exploration stories where the company already has a pretty decent resource in hand already, plus the high octane upside potential. Typically it's, very high risk where they have a big target but they have nothing really to back it up. So if whatever target is a miss, you end up with having nothing, owning shares of something that, well, has no copper, gold, whatever. But in this case, we actually as shareholders, we own maybe around 100 to 150 million ounces of silver already, which could be expanded on given the footprint of the CRD. And you have maybe tier 1 porphyry potential as well. Yeah, that's about it. It feels weird because most of the time when it's like Condor, for example, which is like the price might be enormous, but still you're always, or typically you're in that situation where it's like, yeah, but if they don't hit anything, if it's just an anomaly, whatever, it's like, despite all the great context, they end up not finding anything. I mean, then you might be sitting at a loss for a long time until the company might be able to find something else to do or whatever. But in this case, you actually are buying a silver deposit, which I think, even though it's not world class by any stretch of the imagination, in my opinion, I still could see Hercules do pretty well just in a rising silver environment. So yeah, I think that let's say the risk reward is pretty yeah, I was gonna say almost unique. It's like, okay, you're buying 150 million ounces and you get maybe world-class potential as well. So that's about it. You can read the article and consider me biased. I bought quite a few shares. I've been buying today as well. And excuse me. So yeah, no guarantees, of course. It's just that, hey, looks really good. If it ends up being really good, maybe just maybe this could be one of those cases where in 2 years maybe we'll be up 5 to 10x or something. Yeah, just an idea. Again, you do what you want because there's no guarantees, and obviously if you check the forums, I mean the sentiment is very frothy. Typically I would stay away from that, but in this case I actually think that the amount of warrants, etc., are keeping a lid on the share price. So even though there's a lot of excitement, I don't think the valuation has become too stretched yet. I mean, compare that to Garibaldi, which was very hyped back in the day, 2016, 17. That ran to 550 million before a single assay was out. Now that is, I mean, world-class hype. And going, a valuation that's way ahead of itself. And they didn't have a margin of safety either. They didn't have, 150 million ounces of silver or pounds of nickel or whatever in the ground. So that's, I would like it to be much less hyped, but I can't really justify not buying simply because of that, because I do not think that the valuation is exaggerated at all, really. But who knows? I mean, nobody knows what's actually going to happen. It's just that right now it looks like this could be really, really big, and the first ever hole outside the CRD was so good that it's statistically very unusual. I mean, if you look at a Kennerland study, you would be happy if you drilled 100 gram meter. That's for gold though, so I guess you can't just compare the apples to apples. But in that study done by Kennerland, if you hit 100+ gram meter hole within the first 10,000 meters drilled, that could be a very good sign. They drilled a 200 gram meter on the first hole. which again suggest either they're very, very lucky, or this might be a extremely robust system that they're getting into. My bet is that it's the latter, given the soil anomalies and whatever, and the fact that they got those hits in the pyrite halo. So who knows? It's like, I don't know if we have overlapping systems that's like, you know, two porphyries, and they're kind of, the bornite rich zone came from, I don't know, this western porphyry, and then it got infused by, you know, more distal copper mineralization from an eastern porphyry or anything like that. But it's like, hey, okay, I wouldn't mind if you had two porphyry bodies coming up with mineralization and just squirting that out in the surrounding rocks, and yeah, kind of, I was gonna say, high grade the crap out of this area. So yeah, that's about it. Do your own due diligence. This is not investing advice. I'm not a geologist or a mining engineer. Do what makes sense to you, and assume I might buy or sell shares at any point in time. It's like, I have no idea when we might get news. I don't know how I will interpret that news, whatever, but it's like, yeah, you know, right now I have a pretty beefy position because I don't think the valuation is stretched enough. I think there's still enough, you know, a lot of upside left in case this turns out to be as good as it looks. With that said, I don't expect them to just have humongous hits on every single drill hole that's been drilled so far, for example. But it appears that, I mean, yeah, the pyrite halo alone might be pretty well mineralized. But it's like, at the end of the day, I think they're gonna find something here on top of the silver mineralization. Thanks for listening. Bye.